A DEA agent was heading to her friend's wedding. She was dressed like an ordinary girl. No government vehicle, no security detail, just riding a motorcycle like any regular person. When she reached near the town of Huntsville, she spotted a highway patrol checkpoint ahead. 3 or 4 police officers were standing outside the checkpoint on the road. Among them stood Sergeant Marcus Thompson in his uniform. He raised his baton and signaled the girl to stop. The girl pulled her motorcycle to the side of the road and stopped. The sergeant asked in a stern voice, "Where are you heading?" The girl replied in a very calm tone, "Going to a friend's wedding." Sergeant Marcus Thompson looked her up and down. She was a beautiful 28-year-old woman. Her name was Sarah Bennett. Then he said with a smirk, "Oh, really? Going to your friend's wedding to eat some free food? But where's your helmet, sweetheart? You think your daddy's supposed to wear it for you? Why didn't you wear it? And you were speeding too. Time to write you up." As he said this, he started pulling out a citation slip. Sarah understood that his intentions weren't right, and this was all just an excuse. She said, "Officer, I haven't broken any law." "Oh, lady, don't teach me the law," Marcus snapped back irritably. He glanced at an officer standing nearby. Then, turning back to Sarah, he said, "She needs to learn a lesson." Suddenly, the sergeant slapped Sarah hard across her cheek. "Too many questions, lady. When a cop tells you something, you shut up and comply." Sarah's head spun for a moment, but she composed herself. The anger in her eyes was clearly visible. The sergeant laughed and said, "Still got that arrogance in her eyes. I've straightened out plenty like her. Time to teach her a proper lesson." An officer stepped forward and said, "Sergeant, let's take her to the station. That's where she'll learn how to talk to cops." Then another officer grabbed Sarah's arm and pulled her, saying, "Get in the cruiser, now." Sarah jerked her arm free and said angrily, "Don't you dare touch me or you'll regret the consequences." The sergeant got even more furious. He told another officer, "Look at this attitude." The officer moved forward, grabbed Sarah by her hair, and started dragging her. Sarah groaned in pain, yet she still hadn't revealed her real identity. She wanted to see how low these people could stoop. Meanwhile, an officer angrily struck her bike with his baton and said in a loud voice, "Think you're so smart? We'll make you our plaything now." Sarah Bennett now clearly understood what was about to happen to her and how far these people could fall. The sergeant's eyes were filled with rage. He shouted loudly, "I've seen plenty of smartasses like you. You mess with the law, you pay the price. Let's take her to the station. She'll understand there." Even at this moment, Sarah remained silent. She still made no attempt to reveal her identity. She wanted to see how much these people could disgrace the system and how much injustice they could inflict on an ordinary citizen. Sergeant Marcus was now completely worked up. In front of him stood a woman whose soft cheek had been slapped, whose hair had been pulled, who had been forcibly dragged on the road. Yet she stood there like a statue, completely calm. No screaming, no tears. Sergeant Marcus was thinking that once they got to the station, he'd see how to deal with this stubborn and arrogant woman. This wasn't just anger. It was a rage that was smoldering inside. The station chief sergeant laughed and said, "Now her tongue is getting loose too. Let's see at the station how much her tongue runs." As soon as they entered the station, the sergeant shouted loudly, "Hey, where's everyone? Get coffee and water ready. We've got some special goods today." Sarah Bennett still said nothing. She just kept looking at the station walls. She was observing how these people treated those helpless people who never raised their voice. Just then, an officer leaned towards Sergeant Marcus and whispered, "What's the case, Sarge?" The sergeant said with a laugh, "Oh, nothing. Just slap her with speeding or no helmet. Whatever excuse works. Just write whatever you want. We just need to book her and break that arrogance. Don't ask too many questions." Sarah was hearing everything, but her eyes remained silent, as if she wanted this police corruption to be exposed by their own mouths. Then the sergeant said, "Can't you hear? What's your name?" But Sarah's silence remained as firm as a stone wall. Then the sergeant slammed his hand on the desk so hard that the sound echoed throughout the station. Then he shouted angrily, "Can't you hear? Tell me your name, now." Sarah turned her face and replied in a calm voice, "Yes, Jennifer Sharma." The sergeant looked at her face and said with a laugh, "You're quite a clever girl. You're pretty experienced at lying. But remember, being too smart can cost you dearly. One mistake and you won't even get a chance to regret it." Then Sarah Bennett was forcibly thrown into that rotten holding cell where two prisoners were already present. One of them looked at Sarah and asked, "Sister, what crime did you commit?" Sarah gave a slight smile but said nothing. Now she was just observing how rotten this entire system had become. If a DEA agent could be locked up without reason, then the condition of an ordinary person was unimaginable. Now she sat in the corner of that cell, watching everything, hearing everything, and understanding every single action. Meanwhile, Sergeant Marcus was preparing a false report. He ordered, "Slap her with theft and blackmail charges," and hitting the file said, "Come on, hurry up." An officer hesitantly asked, "But Sarge, without evidence." Marcus said with a laugh, "In this station, evidence isn't brought in, it's created." A little while later, an officer came into the cell and roughly grabbed Sarah's shoulder. Just as Sergeant Marcus raised his hand, a loud, commanding voice boomed at the doorway, "Stop." Everyone turned to look at the door. Standing there was Senior Lieutenant James Ward. His reputation was considered somewhat better than other officers. He looked inside, and seeing the woman's condition, his brow furrowed. He asked in a stern voice, "What the hell is going on here?" Marcus said with a laugh, "Nothing, Lieutenant. Just some street woman showing too much attitude. Teaching her a lesson." James looked carefully at Sarah. Her demeanor didn't seem like that of an ordinary woman. He asked, "What's her offense?" Marcus got a bit nervous and said, "Well, sir, she was disrespectful during the traffic stop." Now James started to get suspicious. He asked Sarah directly, "What's your name?" Sarah remained silent. Marcus said with a laugh, "See, Lieutenant, she won't even give her name." Now James was fully alert. He gave a strict order, "Put her in a separate cell alone." Marcus was shocked. "But, Lieutenant," James said firmly, "I'll handle this myself." Following his order, Sarah was taken to another separate cell and locked in. That cell was even more foul-smelling and darker than the previous one. Sarah looked around. In one corner lay a broken table and nearby, a rusty iron rod. Now she was seeing the real face of this rotten system even more closely. Every moment, her eyes were understanding that the law had now become limited to just paperwork. Meanwhile, an officer came running and said, "Lieutenant, there's a big vehicle parked outside." Marcus was startled. He asked. What vehicle? The officer said nervously, Sir, a government vehicle. Marcus immediately went outside. As soon as he looked inside the vehicle, he was shocked. He ran back and said in a low voice, Sir. Marcus said irritably, What happened? Who's here? The officer said trembling, Sir, the police commissioner is here. Marcus's face went pale. Senior Lieutenant James Ward also became alert. Now, the matter had reached straight to the top. The police commissioner entered the station. His eyes clearly showed anger. He looked at Marcus and asked in a stern voice, Sergeant Marcus, what circus is running here? Marcus got nervous and said, Nothing, Commissioner, just a small case, that's all. The commissioner picked up the file from the desk and started reading it carefully. A frown appeared on his forehead. Now Marcus was completely trapped. The commissioner looked directly at the woman and asked, What's your name? And then for the first time, Sarah Bennett gave a slight smile and said, DEA Special Agent Sarah Bennett. Complete silence fell over the station. Every face turned pale. Marcus's hands and feet started trembling. All the other officers looked at each other in shock. Marcus felt the ground slip from under his feet. The woman he thought was a petty criminal was the very officer who handled major federal investigations across the district. She wasn't just any woman. She was DEA Special Agent Sarah Bennett herself, the woman who had been dragged on the street, whose hair had been pulled, who had been slapped. When this truth came out, there was chaos in the entire station. All the officers were stunned. The commissioner looked at Sergeant Marcus with eyes full of intense anger and roared, Marcus, how dare you file false charges against a federal officer? Marcus was trying to say something when Senior Lieutenant James Ward, standing nearby, said loudly, Sir, I told you earlier that something was fishy here. Now Marcus was completely alone. Then, for the first time, Sarah Bennett announced her decision in her calm but firm voice. Marcus, your career is over. Your suspension is confirmed, and criminal charges will be filed against you. Hearing this, Marcus's face turned white. His breath started choking. The other officers also started avoiding eye contact with him. Sarah took that paper in her hand and read it carefully. The commissioner looked sharply at James Ward and said, Go check if this paper is genuine or just for show. James searched the computer records and then looked up and said, Sir, it's genuine, but he hasn't handed over charge to the new sergeant yet, which means he's still the official sergeant here, and all these crimes happened during his tenure. Nothing can save him now. Sarah Bennett looked Marcus in the eyes and said, Now your new address will be the same place where you used to put others. The commissioner also nodded, putting his stamp of approval on her words. As soon as two officers moved forward to grab him, Marcus played his card again and shouted, Wait, Agent Bennett. I'm not alone. Do you think all the blame is only mine? Then, pointing to the other police personnel in the station, he said, They were all with me. Everyone up to the top is involved. As soon as he said this, the color drained from some officers' faces. Senior Lieutenant James Ward, sensing the situation, started looking at everyone one by one with suspicious eyes. Sarah Bennett said in a calm but firm voice, looking at the commissioner, Now this entire station needs to be cleaned up. No one will be spared. The commissioner also nodded and said, Absolutely, Agent Bennett. Now everyone will be held accountable one by one. As soon as these words left his mouth, it was like lightning struck inside the station. Outside the station, some reporters were already standing. They had suspected for some time that some major scandal was going on inside the station. As soon as they got news that the entire station had been lined up, they immediately started making it viral breaking news on their phones. At that very moment, a gleaming vehicle stopped in front of the station. The door opened, and the chief of police himself stepped out. He looked around. Everyone's faces showed shock. All the station officers were standing silently on one side. The chief asked in a sharp voice, "How long has the circus been running here?" But both the commissioner and the station chief were completely silent. Then Sarah Bennett looked the chief straight in the eyes and said, "Do you think you'll get away with this?" James Ward immediately pulled out a file and handed it to Sarah Bennett. This was the very file that exposed all the chief's dirty deeds. Sarah held out the file toward the chief and said, "Here, look at this. It has the price written for every one of your crimes." Sweat started pouring from the chief's forehead. Without wasting a moment, the commissioner gave a loud order. "Arrest him. Take him into custody immediately." The entire station was stunned. For the first time, such a high-ranking officer had been openly challenged like this. With the chief's arrest, a storm hit the entire district. The matter reached all the way to Washington, D.C. News had reached the state governor, and direct orders came from there that all officers in the district who were colluding should be arrested. In just the next 2 days, more than 40 police officers from across the district, more than 10 high-ranking officials, and some political leaders were also arrested. The entire atmosphere of the Huntsville district changed.